They walked among us, the shattered, the wounded, the ones who smiled with their mouths while their eyes screamed for help. You didn't always notice them. They blended into the crowd, the woman who sang in church but cried in the car. The man who provided for everyone but felt empty inside. The child who laughed at recess but curled into silence at night. And in the spirit realm, where angels and darkness moved unseen, one whisper lingered like ash in the air: they are too broken. They are too bruised. They've already given up. But heaven did not agree. In the quiet places, where hope flickered like the last flame on a matchstick, an angel descended. He did not come with a trumpet. He came with a whisper. Hope still lives here. The town of Ardenhill had once been called the City of Songs. Now it was known as the City of Silences. Factories closed. Church doors shut. Suicides climbed. Families fractured. People still walked. Still worked. Still smiled. But hope was scarce. And in this place, heaven chose to speak. Heaven's plan always begins in the hidden. In Ardenhill, for broken lives were about to collide. Not with each other, at least not yet. But with something far greater. With hope. Through one angel. Through one whisper. Lena used to lead prayer groups. Now she barely had the strength to get her kids out the door. Her husband had left 2 years ago. Her bills stacked like unanswered letters. And her faith? It felt buried beneath layers of survival. One night, as she cried quietly over her kitchen sink, something strange happened. The lights flickered. The air stilled. And she heard it, not with her ears, but in her spirit: hope still lives here. She dropped to her knees. Something deep inside her began to stir. Once hailed as a rising artist, Jordan hadn't touched a piano in 18 months. Grief took his sister. Depression stole his will. He walked the streets at night, invisible, numb, waiting for anything to make him feel alive again. One night, a gust of wind blew his coat open. He reached to close it, but froze. On the brick wall ahead, someone had spray-painted, "Hope still lives here." His heart skipped. Not because of the paint. But because he had dreamed those exact words the night before. Maya was the quiet girl. Invisible at school. Overshadowed at home. Secretly self-harming at night. She didn't know what she believed anymore. She only knew pain had a voice louder than God. But one evening, while walking home, she found a folded paper on a park bench. Written in soft gold ink: "To the broken and bruised, the angel whispers, hope still lives here." She felt something shift. A flicker. A question: could someone, anyone, still see her? Once the spiritual anchor of Ardenhill, Pastor Tomas had watched his flock scatter and his building crumble. He still showed up every Sunday. But most weeks, he preached to empty pews and echoing doubt. One morning, as he opened his Bible, a breeze blew in from the broken windowpane behind the pulpit. And he heard it. Clear. Gentle. Impossible. Hope still lives here. Tears flooded his eyes. He hadn't heard God in months. But now, God whispered like an old friend. High above the town, unseen to man, a single angel stood, wings wrapped in light, eyes burning with compassion. He wasn't sent to rescue. He was sent to remind. To the broken. To the bruised. To the forgotten. He carried the assignment: tell them. Show them. Hope isn't dead. It lives. Right where they thought it was lost. And with each whisper, a seed began to grow. Invisible to the world, but unstoppable in spirit. The angel did not arrive with thunder or fire. He came with breath, wind, stillness. Whispers. And now, the whisper had landed in 4 hearts: Lena, Jordan, Maya, and Pastor Tomas. For Wounded lives, still beating despite the breaks. What they didn't know was this: they weren't alone in their sorrow. Heaven was weaving them together. Thread by thread. Heaven always begins in secret. Before the stage, there is silence. Before the bloom, there is root. And in Arden Hill, the roots of hope began to press into soil long hardened by grief. The angel walked the streets unseen. Touching doorknobs. Whispering in dreams. Leaving invisible marks that only broken hearts could feel. She had just finished washing clothes at the laundromat when she noticed a small, wrinkled card had fallen from her dryer. At first, she thought it was trash. But then she read the words, "You are not invisible. You are still a mother of strength. A gathering is coming. Hope still lives here." There was no name. No address. Just a time. Saturday. 7 p.m. She clutched it to her chest. She hadn't been to a gathering in over a year. But something told her, this was not man-made. He hadn't played in so long, his fingers forgot how to rest. But that morning, after seeing the words spray-painted on the wall, Jordan felt something unexplainable. He walked into a local cafe. It was nearly empty, but in the back corner was a dusty, untouched upright piano. The barista, an older woman with kind eyes, nodded. "It still works. Try it." He sat. Touched one key. Then another. By the third chord, tears were streaming down his face. Not from sorrow. But because he felt again. The angel stood behind him, hand hovering just above his shoulder, whispering softly, "Play until hope sings." Saturday arrived. Maya didn't tell anyone where she was going. She just followed the feeling. Her feet led her to a small chapel, long closed, recently reopened. Inside were chairs. Candles. Silence. And 3 people. Lena. Jordan. Pastor Tomas. She sat in the back. Unsure. Ready to run. But then the music began. It wasn't loud. It wasn't perfect. But it was holy. Jordan played as if heaven had taught him. Pastor Tomas read from Isaiah. Lena lit a candle and simply said, "This light is for the ones who almost gave up, but didn't." Maya didn't move. But something inside her shattered, and began to mend. The moment he stepped to the front of that small chapel, something shifted. Not outwardly. But within. The last time he had preached, he felt like a shell. This time, he felt fire in his bones. He looked out and saw them, not a crowd, just a handful of broken ones. But he also saw the angel. Not with his eyes. But with his spirit. Standing in the back. Smiling. Whispering, "They came. That's enough. Let me do the rest." They met again. And again. Each week, a few more came. Someone grieving a lost spouse. A boy recovering from addiction. An elderly woman who hadn't left her house in a year. No fanfare. No lights. No promotion. Only whispers. And each time they gathered, they lit one candle and said together, "Hope still lives here." It became their rhythm. Their anthem. And in heaven, angels gathered to watch. Because this wasn't just a church. It was a recovery room for the soul. Hope had begun to whisper. But now, it was ready to speak. What began as a gathering of 4 quietly fractured lives was now turning into a holy movement, one that no one had planned, but heaven had long prepared. In Arden Hill, the town once called the City of Silences, hope was becoming loud, not in volume, but in presence. The angel had stayed. His wings now covered more than just 4. He watched as the healing began. Not dramatic. but divine. One night after a small prayer gathering, Lena turned and froze. Standing at the back of the chapel was her ex-husband. He looked older. He looked wrecked. He looked human. He stepped forward, holding a letter. I heard someone singing about hope. I didn't think I deserved to walk in, but something made me come anyway. She didn't say anything. She just handed him a candle and whispered, "Hope still lives here." Jordan had started writing again. Lyrics. Chords. Even melodies. But the real moment came when he shared a song publicly. At a small open mic night downtown, he sang for the first time in front of others. The room fell silent as he sang, "For the broken, for the bruised. There's still light inside of you. Though the night has bruised your name, you're still breathing through the flame." When he finished, no one clapped. They just sat in awe. Some cried. Some prayed. Hope had filled the room. And the angel whispered in his spirit, "You're not writing songs anymore. You're rebuilding souls." One Friday evening, Maya walked to the chapel with a blade in her coat pocket. She didn't plan to stay long. She just wanted to sit in the back, then disappear. But Lena saw her. Said nothing. Just sat beside her. Then Pastor Tomas knelt beside both of them, held Maya's hand, and said, "God told me someone would walk in tonight, carrying more pain than words. I didn't know it would be you. But I'm glad you came." Maya said nothing. She just handed him the blade. And wept for the first time in months. The chapel had once been cold. Now, during prayer, a warmth lingered. People reported feeling electricity on their skin. Others saw light in the corners of the room. One night, a boy with a tumor in his spine stood up completely pain-free during worship. Another evening, a woman battling depression heard a voice in her heart say, "You are not your trauma. You are my treasure." The next week, she danced. And the week after that, she brought 5 others. Pastor Tomas wasn't preaching anymore. He was simply hosting heaven. And every week, he opened the meeting with the same words, "For the broken and bruised. Hope still lives here." The angel, assigned to Arden Hill, had completed phase 1. Now came phase 2. He whispered to business owners. To teachers. To city council members. Suddenly, a local diner started offering free meals on Thursday nights, called Hope Table. A mechanic offered free oil changes to single moms, no explanation. High school students started organizing Hope Huddles during lunch breaks. No one could explain it. But the town was waking up. Not in noise. But in purpose. One night, after a prayer gathering, it began to drizzle. But what caught everyone's attention was this: a rainbow appeared at night. Impossible, yes. But visible? Absolutely. Right above the chapel. Arched in color over a town once defined by gray. And everyone who saw it knew, this wasn't weather. It was a sign. That same night, Maya wrote in her journal, "I didn't believe angels were real. Now I believe, they don't just watch. They whisper. And that whisper saved me." Arden Hill was no longer the same. Once called the City of Silences, it was now humming with something unexplainable. Not noise. Not hype. But presence. People couldn't describe it. But they felt it. In their homes. At their work. Even walking down the street. There was peace where anxiety had lived. Joy where numbness had reigned. And across the skies, a quiet stirring that heaven had not finished yet. Because now, heaven was preparing to walk the streets. On a still Monday morning, the angel stood at the edge of the chapel roof. Wings extended, eyes soft with glory, he whispered to the wind, "Blow gently, but carry the weight of my words. Let every street know, I still walk among the broken. The wind obeyed. It didn't bring a storm. It brought awareness. And for the first time in years, the people of Arden Hill paused. Paused in coffee shops. In classrooms. In traffic. They didn't know why. But they suddenly wanted to pray. One night, as the chapel filled with more people than it could hold, Lena stood and said just one line, "I used to think broken people had to stay quiet. But I'm learning. God heals loud." And then she began to sing. Not as a worship leader. But as a mother of hope. One by one, voices joined. Not perfect. But pure. The angel hovered overhead, tears like light running down his face. He whispered, "This is what heaven sounds like." A young woman had filmed Jordan's open mic performance weeks earlier. She posted it online without telling him. The song went viral. But not in the usual way. Not because it was catchy. Because it healed. Thousands commented, "I was about to take my life. Then I heard this. I've been battling depression for 20 years. This song broke something." Jordan didn't seek fame. He sought obedience. And heaven gave him influence. Maya had never shared anything she wrote. But one night, in the middle of a candlelit gathering, Pastor Tomas handed her the mic. She froze. "Then read, you didn't see my scars, but he did. You didn't know I wanted to vanish, but he sent light instead. So now I stay. Not because I'm strong, but because I found out hope lives even in people like me." The room went silent. And then, people stood and clapped, not in applause, but in awe. One morning during prayer, Pastor Tomas saw it. Not with eyes. But in spirit. A scroll descended from heaven. He reached out and held it. The writing pulsed with light. It read, "Your town has become my dwelling. What once was forgotten is now marked. Tell the people this, I walk among them. The king is not far." He fell to his knees. He knew what was coming next. A visitation. The next Sunday, people began arriving early. No flyers. No announcements. Just hunger. The air in the chapel was thick. But not heavy, holy. As worship began, children began crying uncontrollably, not from fear, but from overwhelming love. The elderly stood without pain. The depressed began to laugh. The addicted began to confess. The proud began to kneel. And then it happened. A light descended visibly in the center of the chapel. Some said it looked like fire. Others said it looked like wind wrapped in gold. But all felt it, heaven was in the room. The angel stood in the corner, arms folded in reverence. He had completed his mission. Before ascending, the angel left one final message with Pastor Tomas: "Tell them, I was never far. I waited in the shadows of their pain. And now that they've let me in, hope will never leave this place." Hope had once whispered in Arden Hill. But now, it had taken root. It had risen. And it had wrapped itself around the hearts of the people like a flame that refused to die. The angel had completed his assignment. But before returning to the realm beyond time, he had one last gift to leave behind. Not gold. Not glory. But a seed, the kind only heaven could plant. And this seed would outlive storms, sorrow, and even death. It was the seed of eternal hope. The old chapel that once echoed with silence now carried the sound of joy. Every night, candles were lit. Testimonies shared. Songs written. Tears shed. And healing multiplied. People drove from other cities, some from other countries. Just to sit in that room. Not because it was famous. But because heaven still lingered there. One Sunday morning, as the adults worshipped, the children asked to sing too. They were given the mic. They didn't sing a popular song. They sang what they had heard Maya read weeks ago, turned into a melody only heaven could have written. He saw my scars. He stayed in my night. I thought he had left. But hope was holding the light. Adults wept. Not because it was flawless, but because it was true. Lena had gone from exhausted survivor to pillar of strength. She began teaching young mothers how to war in the spirit. How to cry and worship at the same time. How to find God between laundry loads and court dates. Her words were simple: if hope found me in a kitchen sink, it'll find you in a hospital room, a courtroom, a bathroom floor. Mothers wept. Mothers healed. Mothers began to hope again. Jordan never returned to the music industry. He created something different, the House of Song and Silence. It was part music studio, part prayer room. People came not to record hits, but to hear heaven. Every melody written there went global. And every artist left with something more than a demo. They left carrying healing. Maya never forgot the bench. Or the folded letter that saved her life. So she started a ministry called Bench Notes. Every week, volunteers left handwritten letters all over the city, on benches. In lockers. On dashboards. In hospital waiting rooms. Each one carried one message in different forms: you are seen. You are still breathing. And hope still lives here. She never needed a pulpit. She used paper and honesty. And thousands found life again. He was older now. His beard was silver. But his eyes glowed more than ever. He didn't call himself a preacher anymore. He said, "I'm just a doorkeeper in a house where hope lives." Before retiring, he lit one final candle in the chapel. And as he did, he whispered, to the next generation, "Don't let the fire go out." On the night the town held its 3-year celebration of revival, no one saw it happen. But in the spirit, it was undeniable. The angel returned. He hovered above the chapel once more. His wings were now folded in peace. His mission fulfilled. He looked down and smiled. He whispered for the last time, to the broken and bruised. You believed again. You loved again. You rose again. And because of that, hope will live here forever. Then he disappeared, not in a blaze of glory, but in a breeze of grace. Arden Hill no longer needed a slogan. It had a legacy. Visitors still came. Not to admire architecture, but to find what the world said had died, hope. And every person who passed through the old chapel saw a plaque on the back wall, engraved in gold, "To the broken and bruised," the angel whispered, and we listened. Hope still lives here.